First of all, thank you all who are here tonight to hear what's going on with the water situation within Cottage Grove. I'm Mayor Byron Bailey. We do have one of our other council members in back. I see that Lorraine Mills is here. But if you have some questions at the end of this, depending on how long this goes, I don't think it's super long from a presentation standpoint. Either Jennifer can answer it. We do have a council meeting at 7, and actually some of the items that are on the council meeting tonight is to fast track some of the stuff that we're doing in order to get the filtration system going. So we'll have to step out at 7 if it takes longer, but Jennifer and the staff who's here that manage the water treatment and all that within the city of Cottage Grove will be here if you need them to be here and you have more questions to ask. I also mentioned, because we just got this like in the last day or so, we do have an opportunity for rain barrels and a rebate program that we're working with, thanks to the county for helping us out there with getting some processes to do that to help those citizens that want to. And whether it's this particular issue or for the future conservation efforts, that's how I look at it. So this isn't just for the fact that we're going to do what we're dealing with right now with the water restrictions within our community. So Jennifer basically did this presentation to us at after the last council meeting, in essence, to kind of give us as a council an update of why are we where we're at today and what we're doing to fix it. And when we knew and when we didn't know and so on. So there's a lot of questions I'm sure a lot of people have. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Levitt who will walk us through this. So thank you. Thanks,
well, thank you, Mayor. Well, tonight we want to talk about where we're at today, but we also need to step back and look at how we got to today. Is this too loud? You guys okay? All right. Well, from an actual notification timeline, we have to step back in time. Back in August of 2016, that's when the EPA released new health-based regulations related to PFC chemicals. At that time, MDH said, hey, there's something unique that's happening in southern Washington County with a variety of PFC chemicals. We want to ensure that if you look at that in a combined aggregate fashion, what does that mean to the population, and specifically the most vulnerable population? So when we talk about the most vulnerable population, that is fetuses, infants, pregnant nursing mothers, young children. So when they set their health-based values, that's really the most vulnerable population, and that's who they're targeting for their regulations. At that time, the city of Cottage Grove had anticipated that well number 2 was going to probably exceed the health-based values. So back in August of 2016, the city of Cottage Grove took their number 2 well offline and have not been using it since. Now we fast forward to May of 2017. On May 22nd, it was a Monday morning, the Minnesota Department of Health comes to the city of Cottage Grove and tells us the results of the new health-based values and what that means to our wells. We learned that morning that 8 of our 11 wells were now above the new health-based values. At that time, we knew that we needed to deliver safe and reliable drinking water. And one way to ensure that we had safe drinking water is that we took 5 of our wells offline. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the wells that we took offline in a minute to show you the pumping capacity reductions. The very next day at noon, when the Minnesota Department of Health was having their press conference to talk about the new health-based values and what that meant, the City of Cottage Grove City Council at the same time was declaring a local emergency. And that is when we put the watering ban into effect. At that time, we were working on an operational plan that would be blessed by the MDH just a few days later to ensure that the water that we deliver to the residents of Cottage Grove is safe and meets all health-based guidelines. And then, at that same time, we knew that we had to work towards a temporary water treatment facility for our wells. Now, one would say, did the city of Cottage Grove respond quickly? I would say yes. Did we act transparently? Yes. Some have asked, what mandated you to have to make this change? The letter that I have up here is dated June 7th from the Minnesota Department of Health. They very clearly in the letter states that we must take actions to bring our wells into compliance. When this letter was issued, we already had an approved operating plan that met these guidelines. So we were even ahead of the curve before we received the formal notification and the requirements established by the Minnesota Department of Health. So I told you that there were some wells that we had to take offline. I want you to be able to understand this very clearly because it means a lot to the city of Cottage Grove and our reduced pumping capacity. So we have 11 wells. Now I'll tell you there's not going to be a quiz after this. There's how many gallons each well can produce, how many gallons per minute. And then the city of Cottage Grove has 3 pressure zones, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And so this tells you which pressure zone each well is in. And this is telling you what our current status or capacity is. So when the Department of Health met with us on May 22nd, we took well number 2 offline. That was already offline since last August, so it's not available to us. We took well 3 offline. We took well 4 offline. We took well 6 offline. We took well 10 offline. Those wells are not operating today. We are only providing water to the city of Cottage Grove at full capacity from well 1, well 9, and well 11. Under our operating plan, we are allowed to operate well 5, well 7, and well 8, only in a blended situation with those wells that are operating in full capacity in the green. So when we look at this, it does matter, because I said we have 3 pressure zones in the city of Cottage Grove. We have a low zone, an intermediate zone, and a high zone. So when we look at that, we like those wells to balance within the pressure zones. So well 2 is located over here in the low zone. That's the well that's been off. Well number 1 has been operating and is fully functioning. Well 10, which down in our industrial park, is offline. This well number 10, that is like the workhorse of the low pressure zone. That's our high producing well. So right now we're at a really limited capacity because we don't have our workhorse online. When we go to our main well field, well number 3, 4, and 6 are offline. Well number 9 is the only one that's operating at full capacity, and then we are allowed to run 7, 8, and 5 in limited capacity to blend. Well number 11 is our only well that's operating in our high zone that's operating at full capacity. And some have asked, well, why is well 9 not affected and the other ones are? I can tell you they've analyzed that and we have not come to a conclusive definition. Some have speculated, the depth of the aquifer. A lot of it has to do with the contamination plume and how it's traveling through the city. Because I'll tell you, the water is actually migrating towards the river. So the Woodbury disposal site, which is up here in Woodbury, that gradient, meaning the water is flowing towards the Mississippi, so it's flowing into our main well field. People have asked, well, why does the city have to prevent exterior watering right now? Well, the city of Cottage Grove can operate at a pretty steady level in the winter, and you can see in May we start to climb, in June and July we start to peak. So we start to provide a lot of water in our summer months. And you can see from a normal water demand down here, it's pretty easy, but we have a very significant spike in water use in the summer. So to graphically show that, the orange is what our current capacity is. So we're at about 7 million gallons. Our summer peak day demand, if everybody were allowed to water, would be at about 14 million gallons. Our maximum capacity under normal operations is over 16 million gallons. So since we're talking water, and I like visuals, I'm going to show you a visual. All right. So at our max capacity, we have a 5-gallon bucket. What the city of Cottage Grove can pump right now and supply to residents without watering is about half the capacity. So that is what we're dealing with and why we're asking residents to conserve water and to provide us the ability to provide the continual safe drinking water for everyone. So in order for us to look at easing those watering bans and to continue to provide safe water with additional resiliency and redundancy, we need to install water treatment at 2 of our wells. So well number 10, which I mentioned, is that workhorse in our low zone. And the other one is well number 3, which is in our main well field. That will provide us the ability to blend more water and have additional capacity with these treatment facilities. The first treatment facility, which is already under construction, I have some photos of it, is at well 10. This is the Warner Electric driveway that's there. This is the well 10 building that sits right there. This is going to be the structure that we're going to construct around the well to provide for the water treatment. We also have some leased area here where you're going to see cars parking, construction staging, and being used as a boneyard for the construction activity that will take place on well 10. You've probably even seen a lane closure here on 95th Street if you live over in that area. This is what the treatment facility will look like. It will have 10 tanks within it. Those tanks are very large. They have what they call carbon filtration, or GAC, granulated activated carbon. So we will be connecting the well house to this, and then the piping will connect to it. Now we have to pump the water in, and all that carbon that's inside those tanks will actually have the PFCs latch onto it, and then the PFC chemicals will not flow through the water, but they'll attach to the carbon. Approximately every 250 days, we'll have to change out the carbon in these large tanks to be able to provide new media for the PFCs to be treated and removed. This is just a visual, because if you live over on the 95th Street side, you're probably going to see these tanks be delivered next week. They'll come in on very large cranes and they'll be set out on the concrete slab. The construction started the first week that we learned of the actual situation. We were removing trees, getting contractors under contract, because you may not know this, but when we declare a state of emergency, that provides us an expedited construction process. So we're able to get contractors on board and out here constructing very rapidly. So for example, if you drove by the site last weekend, you saw construction workers tying steel and preparing for concrete on Saturday and Sunday, and we poured a lot of the concrete footings and slab on Monday morning. We'll be doing another large pour tomorrow, and as I mentioned, those actual tanks will start to arrive next week. So once those tanks are set, we will start actually attaching all that piping that I showed in that diagram. We'll then be putting all that carbon into those tanks, and then we have some startup process. So we have to fill those large tanks, and then the Minnesota Department of Health has to come out and actually sample from those tanks to ensure that we're compliant. So we'd anticipate seeing that well back online at the end of July. Now the other thing too is you may drive by there and say, wow, she showed me a building. Where is the building? I see a fence and I see tanks. Well, the problem is we can't get the actual steel structure here until the first part of October. So starting in October is when they'll actually construct the building around the tanks. So in the interim, you're going to see fencing out there on an interim basis. Once the actual building is constructed, we'll take down the fencing, and will provide the security we need for our system. The other well that will be getting treated is well number 3. Well number 3 is in Ideal Park, just off of Hyde Court. This is the well building that sits right here. We're actually going to construct the treatment facility right here. We're going to be removing these trees and starting the excavation of this here shortly. You'll see some excavation work as it goes out to tie into a sanitary sewer out in the street. This is what the building will look like for well number 3. It'll have 4 tanks that'll sit in the structure, very similar to well 10. You won't see them actually physically connected. Those pipes will be going underground for the connection of those 2 buildings. Now, this schedule is actually tracking approximately 3 weeks behind well 10. So once we we're hoping to move contractors from well 10 right to the well 3 site and expediting that. So we're anticipating that well number 3 would be going through that startup and testing the week of August 14th. Similar to the site on well 10, you'll first see this as chain link fence around and protection for that until we can actually get the building in, and that would probably actually start closer to mid-October for that structure to be constructed. So now there are special regulations since we have issued a state of emergency related to our water, and that is our code section 81-9A. Under the Water Conservation Emergency Regulations, the mayor is allowed to impose an emergency water usage which limits the times, hours, or completely prohibits water use of the city's water system. And this is what we're under right now, is an emergency situation due to the reduced pumping capacity. Under that, right now, if any citations were to be issued, there's a mandatory court appearance and there's a misdemeanor offense with a penalty with a maximum fine up to 1,000 days. Let's try $1,000. There's or up to 90 days in jail. Now, the one thing that I want to point out to you, right now, the city of Cottage Grove is more committed right now to providing education. We want to educate residents, inform residents of the watering ban, and use citation really as our last measure for compliance. So we've had, public works staff, public safety, park staff out there. Maybe your neighbors have received a door hanger. We want to educate everybody and inform them of the watering ban. We don't really desire to go to the citation route, but we do have that ability if compliance isn't being met. Some people have said, well, why do I see some people, like in our new houses up in north of 70th Street, watering their new sod? Well, they can get a new sod, seed, or tree permit from Public Works, and we have issued permits to that. One thing that I would say on those new homes, you may not know this, but when a home is under construction, they are required to have sod in their front yard. And their financial lender will require it, and the city of Cottage Grove requires it for a certificate of occupancy permit. So do we want to hold up home construction? No. Do we want to prevent residents from moving into Cottage Grove? No. We want them to be able to continue on in that, and that's why they are granted permission for that. There are some businesses in the city of Cottage Grove that have permits as well. You've seen maybe National Tire and Battery, and you've seen by Noodles, Chipotle, AT&T, where we did some road work for widening for that right turn lane. They do have permission to water. There are 2 construction sites that we are watering, and because they're still under contract. Now, I want to explain that because right now the contractor is fully responsible for the establishment and replacement of those shrubs, trees, grasses, and things. If we were to not water them, the financial burden for replacement would fall back on the city of Cottage Grove. And so we don't want to incur any additional costs related to that. So we do have 2 construction sites that are allowed to water. And so if you fall into these categories or have more questions, the Public Works Department can help you with that, and we have staff here tonight. The one thing, as the mayor mentioned, we have a rain barrel rebate program. So we have flyers for you tonight and a copy of the application. This is a great opportunity. You get $20 off a rebate on your next water bill if you fill out the application, provide a copy of the receipt, and snap a picture of your system installed. We have talked with both Menards and Ace here in town to alert them to this program in the anticipation that there's going to be more interest in it. So I believe they'll be stocking up on those. So take advantage of that. You can get up to 3 of them per property, so that's up to $60 you can get utilizing rain barrels. And we did receive a grant from Washington County for this program, and so they've been a great partner to help bring this program and water conservation efforts to Cottage Grove. We have used a variety of communication methods and continue to. We've really worked on our press releases, working with the South Washington County Bulletin on the notices of the watering ban. We've developed the frequently asked questions. We have a dedicated web page for the watering ban. We've been using Facebook and Nextdoor. Many of you probably received the code RED notification when the watering ban went into effect. The local cable commission has been doing a great job and been a great partner with us to get the message out. The mayor has worked tirelessly on different updates, both on using the cable commission with YouTube videos, editorials. We're really trying to get the message out about the watering ban and get facts out in front of the public. And so I would encourage you, if you want to stay up to date, the best place is to go to this part of our website and stay informed about the process, specifically our treatment facilities and other things that are happening. Some of you that may be on private wells, I would encourage you to go to the Minnesota Department of Health's website to gain more information about your well, your testing, your results, and the process related to that. And if a lot of you have concern about grass, the University of Minnesota's Extension Office has a great resource for turf maintenance and restoration and efforts there. So those are some great resources, but the one I'd really encourage you to look at is the city's webpage. That'll have up-to-date information on the situation.